Well, hello there, Internet and creatures of the beyond. Welcome back to a special session today. Today I'm gonna do something different. We're going to do a case study, and a case study usually involves analyzing and looking at how art is developed. And I'm not here to make like a history session, whatever, but we're gonna go into some aspects related to how the history of art has created some very unique subjects, let's say, and unique people that created that art. If you recognize this hand, awesome. If no, well, this is one of the sketches made by Michelangelo, and it's from a painting called The Creation of Man from the Sistine Chapel in Rome. And I cannot show the full painting simply because, well, we will find out very soon what type of artistic value Michelangelo brought to the world. And unfortunately, I think Steam and YouTube and all the beautiful social media don't particularly take kind to nudity when it comes to paintings, although they are artistic, historical values. Anyway, so let's, in my opinion, if we're going to do a case study, it should never be starting with like, oh, look at this, and let's start analyzing what it means, how it was done, the mechanics, and so on. No. In my personal opinion, if you really want to understand art, you have to understand the artist. Because when you look at the artist's life, the artist's uh, difficult periods that he formed and molded his mentality and so on, then you can kind of get a glimpse into his art and kind of understand why he would orient himself towards a particular style of art. Although I say style in a very loose form here, and we will find out why in a moment. But what is important about Michelangelo's work is that it has happened in a period called the Renaissance. And the Renaissance happened somewhere between the 15th and 16th century, although it probably spends much more than that. Maybe I've seen figures going 700 and something years. So let's say, in a modest term, like from maybe 14th to 17th century. So somewhere along the way. So we had like I'm gonna look a little bit at the wiki because I don't remember all of the years and so on. But the Renaissance brought us people like Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Copernicus, Dante, Machiavelli, even William Shakespeare was part of. Well, he was towards the late end of Renaissance, but anyway, he was also part of this. We had like Donatello, Raphael, and obviously Michelangelo. And in my opinion, Michelangelo was one of my favorite artists. One that inspired me to kind of want to be like him one day. I'm kidding, but well, I'm semi kidding. He was. Well, let's start a little bit with his history. Let me look at his wiki because I don't remember his details. But he was born in 6 March 1475. So that is a long time ago, and he lived 88 years. He was born in Florence, well, in Republic of Florence. His name was Machiavello di Lodovico I can never repeat. So it's Machiavello di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. Michaelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni. Okay. We got his name right. Hopefully. Don't come out of your grave. Because I messed up your name again. Mr. Machiavelli. Sorry, Michelangelo. Oh, Machiavelli is also an interesting character, but maybe some other time. Anyway, so the cool thing about Michelangelo is that in the um, Renaissance period was created for a lot of styles, but most of the styles that came to be were employed by the church because the church was the biggest and the most richest customer that looked out for various exotic things to invest and attract more curious eyes towards their art. So, interestingly enough, Michelangelo wasn't a very religious person. He was, in my opinion, based on his history and the way he was doing his art, I think he was pretty much an atheist. But, living in a very religious environment, he was kind of always feel he felt trapped there. He could not expose his ideas as much as he wished, but he was very clever about how he exposed his ideas. And he got a lot of backlash. He was very controversial, but it's interesting that he managed to survive somehow. Based on all of the crazy things this human being has done, I'm like, wow, respect. Respect. Anyway, so related to his history, he did two amazing pieces. So let's look up some of his work. Um, Let me see. Let me see. I have some images of his work. I cannot put this one. Okay, we're gonna look at Atlas. This is one of his sculptures that never got finished. But as we get a first glimpse at it, we already see that there is a lot of detail in what he's doing. I don't know if this is, I don't know the material. He loved to do a lot of work in marble. First of all, Michelangelo was first and foremost a sculptor, and then he loved to paint. But little was known that he was also an architect. So he did some little architecture here and there for the church as well. But his love was architecture. Was sculpting, and we can see a lot of his work expanding into his other fields. We will go to the case study later on and see why I'm saying that. But the idea is that he was very obsessed with details on the human body, but not in a way that most of the styles in Renaissance were happening, because he's known for two very specific works. Let me see which one is. Well, more than two, but these are the most known ones. The first one is the statue of David, which I cannot show entirely due to his beautiful nudity. But we see out of the start a lot of details going. He was very obsessed with, well, facial features, in my opinion, based on how he was doing facial features. Um, it was kind of like anime if we can compare it to the styles today. uh, because other artists were more inclined to create a lot of depth to cheekbones, and he, to his credit, he did a lot. Some of his works are really detailed towards the face, but he didn't focus most of the time on the face. What he focused along a lot of the time, well, he focused on the eyes of the face, so I have to give him credit for that. But a lot of his work are on the hands, and this is marble, by the way. Nice chest, and then look at this hand. Let me see if I have a better view because I saved it somewhere. Mm, look how much detail goes into the hand. well, this is a sketch, but the idea is that it's made after the sculpture. So you can see that he his proportions of the body are not in equilibrium. I think he was inspired a lot by Greek mythology, and a lot of his art incorporates that because most of his work, his sculptures are titanic. And even though Michelangelo is a big statue, when he creates, and I'm gonna show you a very specific example. So let's look at the La Pietà. I think this is what he made his debut uh, in his career, because after he created La Pietà, a lot of people wanted to employ him, especially the popes. And he lived through a lot of popes, by the way. And I'm gonna get to a very interesting pope in his life. But even though he had a lot of arguments politically and religiously, he was very talented. But he didn't play by the rules. Like, even if we look at this, we clearly see something very wrong here. Like, Jesus in this image um, is very small, is very frail, is way smaller than the mother. And this is intentional. And even if we look at the posture, we kind of see there is, I should say, a very active posture. It's in motion. Even though it's sitting, and sitting down is never portrayed as a posture that has any momentum to it. Here, he manages to create that momentum. You feel like there is a falling in her hands, and she shifts her position in the body, the way her hips are set on the chair, and how her feet are positioned on the ground. One is above and one is lower. So there is this idea of movement and how she tries to shift to better get a grip, or maybe try to feel that grief within her grasp. There is a lot of expression through movement, and this is what's amazing about Michelangelo. He created the story and the expression not only through the position but through how the muscles look, because this is the motive. He puts a lot of details on the muscles, even though we see a lot of details on the clothes as well, and which are magnificent in my opinion. Like, just here, it's just wow. And of course, marble is a stone that is very translucent, if that's the correct word. Well, the idea is that it resembles skin to some degree. So this is why a lot of sculptures love to use marble. But the idea here is that we see the movement, we see the pain, we see the gaze. We also see, interestingly, some regret, maybe, or a little bit of respite between her emotions. But the idea is that she is expressing a lot just through the momentum and position. And we will find another interesting work of his. Let's see. Um, like, for example, here. This is the rebellious slave. And we can already see there is a very weird pose. And to give you an idea of what poses were generally meant to be in that time, if we think of, let me search for. Ah, where is it? Where is it? Here. If we look at Mona Lisa, this is called contrapposto. So it's the counter position. The idea is that you are positioning yourself in a way where it makes sense. Like you shift all your equilibrium towards one leg or one arm, and you can shift your shoulders to go into an angle, so you can turn your head, so it looks more like a portrait. So that was the rule, but not with Michelangelo. Michelangelo loved to put this, I would say, sort of a torture position, because even if we look at our hand, let's see here. Try to keep your hand into this position, and you will see extremely uncomfortable to keep it like this. And it's on purpose, because he doesn't want you to, he doesn't portray reality through these pictures. He exaggerates his curves, he exaggerates the muscles, and the purpose of this exaggeration is to show you there is more to it than just a hand. And interestingly enough, um, in the past, hands were very difficult to make. Well, not very difficult, but they were time consuming, and a lot of portraits, because now we call them selfies, but believe it or not, the people of those times also wanted selfies or portraits or group portraits and so on. So if they would employ an artist, the prices would be higher if they would involve the hands, because they involve a lot of muscles and a lot of bones and a lot of positions and so on. So it was very difficult to, well, it was pricey, that's the reality, to get a nice portrait with hands. So you see a lot of old portraits with their hands behind their backs and so on, and only the rich could employ for portraits with hands. And he was obsessed by hands and legs, and there is so much to explain. The idea is that if we look very closely, we can see that we can start to observe how the position of the bones. This is sort of like the skin is hanging inside the skeleton, on top of the skeleton, and the muscles. This is a large exaggerations, because your muscles will never be this floppy. This usually your muscles are tense, so they would never arch that much unless your hands are super fat, of course. But we see a lot of muscles here, so there is little fat to begin with. That he also loves to include some of the proportions for fat here and there, but it's in equilibrium to expose the muscles better. And of course, it was a different era. People were having a different view of what beauty is than today, of course. So a plump woman would be considered very healthy, while a skinny woman would be considered, well, or man, of course, not necessarily women, but skinny people were in generally considered more sickly. So people who are a little bit chubby were more sexy in those times. That's how the cookie rumbles, I suppose. Uh, okay, let's look at another interesting painting. Wait a second, how do I put that back? Oh yeah, and about the torture. You see, he's not shifting all of the weight on one foot. He's kind of putting that weight on top of the whole body. So it's like you feel that the pressure is pressing on the whole subject. And when it's being pressed, all his muscles are starting to tense as well. So we can start to see the belly muscles, the muscles on the hands and so on, the back. It starts to create that deformation. So there is like a spring in a way. You arch it to the max, you compress it to the max, and when it you feel like it's gonna jump in any second, and you feel that expression, and it feels very energetic. Another interesting one, um, I think this is Marty Dom or something. I don't remember exactly the name, but again, very uncomfortable positions, very tense. Everybody looks grumpy. And this is in a way a reflection of Michelangelo's life because he was always in conflict about his ideas. And funny enough, he kind of included himself in most of his work. He made a little selfie of him. I'm not sure if this portrays his face perfectly here, but he does place himself in some of his other works and paintings and sculpture because he he includes a lot of nudity in well not in all of his work obviously, but there were some, like for example in the 16th chapel, there's nudity. And what's weird about this is that in the religious in that religious era, mm, it wasn't new. Nudity wasn't anything new, but to include nudity in religious portraits, it was controversial. It was kind of taboo. And he had some controversial painting, but I don't remember which one. And I remember that 1 year before his death, there was a council of popes or whatever, of cardinals, sorry, and they wanted to put shrouds all over the genitalias of a big painting he made. I think the Last Supper, if I'm not sure, or I don't know. I might be wrong here. It might not be the Last Supper. I might be wrong about that one. No, it's not the Last Supper. Uh, Damn it. What was it? Let me just scroll a little bit through his work. I might remember. I think it was. Not this one. So it was on the Sistine Chapel. Damn it. Well. Hey, why did you stuck yourself? Okay. In paintings, I think it was. Not crucifixion. This was the crucifixion of Peter. Sorry. Yeah. Um, the Last Judgment, not the Last Supper. I think that was the one that got covered. It was a fresco. And another particular thing that I was telling you guys that he is an atheist in his own way is like when he created in the Sistine Chapel the creation of Adam, the creation of man. That veil behind God symbolizes the shape. Well, it's in perspective, the brain, how we can see it. So it's very, very smart. So he creates that distance between the touch of human and God. Like there is another step that we have to take towards a higher consciousness. So in his life, he was a party animal. That's the reality. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. He really enjoyed his life. He got a lot of cash during his life due to his career, and he had wealthy friends. And he also had wealthy enemies. Although enemies is a strong word, but let's say people that disliked him. And he was employed by Pope Julius II, and that guy wasn't. He made a fortune out through people that weren't very smart, but when he got Julius II, oh my God, everything shifted. He got paid, but that guy was, well, let's say he led some military campaigns to recover some of the Roman territory. So that's how bad as that Pope was. So he wasn't somebody to be trifled with. And he gave Michelangelo the the task to create him a mausoleum, actually a tomb. And he wanted a very ambitious tomb. The reality is that he never managed to realize it because he wanted 47 or something statues on the freaking tomb. It was supposed to be massive. And it wasn't unheard of because a lot of leaders were um, creating their tombs ahead of their death. But this one was supposed to be colossal. And clearly, Mom, he couldn't realize that task, but he did a smaller version. I think the Pope died before the tomb was done, so he had to make a far smaller version with fewer statues. This is the one that I'm talking about, and this is the Pope on top. And we can already see he's small in comparison to all of the statues that he's surrounded with. But the most prominent one is this one, which is Moses. And if we look, this one is the one of the best sculptures that Michelangelo made. And if we look really closely here, we can observe that he has horns. And this is because the Bible of that time that he had available had an error in it. It was a Latin error. I think it was translated from Hebrew. And in Hebrew, the word for his depiction was ray of light or ray of the sun or something like that. But when they translated into Latin, they translated cornuta, which kind of means horned or horny, depending on how you want to translate it. So he was like, well, he had horns, so let's make him some nice horns. But we can already see something very specific. The head is massive, the hands are massive, so it's very titanic. And in comparison to the statues here, although he looks the same size, he's sitting down. And he is twice the size of these characters on the side. And again, we can see that he's sitting on a down position, down posture, sitting posture, but he's still creating a lot of momentum based on the position of the feet, the uncomfortable position of the hands, and he's always tense as well, but he's always like looking towards something, gazing. So he's kind of ready to get up. So you have that idea of impact. And another interesting aspect is that in that particular time when they were creating sculptures and so on, most of the subjects that were created, they were after a triumph. For example, David in other depictions. Let me see if I can find one made by. Which one? Not this one. Oh, why do I still get the... Okay, I think this one. Did I manage? Okay, this is the statue of David, but he looks very infantile here. And this is a contrapposto position because you see that he's shifting on his front leg here, and he's triumphant over the head of Goliath, and he has this posture of, yeah, I won. But on the other hand, in the David that Michelangelo did, and even the Moses one, is always something that acts before something happens. So they're always looking to start an action. So I think in a way creating something triumphant is a little bit easier because it's a position of relaxation in a way, so you don't have to give too much momentum to it, too much expression. It's kind of like, yeah, everything is done, everything is finished, look how beautiful it is. But no, Michelangelo said, I'm gonna do it the hard way. I'm gonna show people how it feels to start something before it even happens, and how much effort and emotion you have to put into it, and how much uh, feelings you have to impose on the way that the subject sets itself up in the background or in the environment that surrounds it. So in that way, I really respect Michelangelo's way because he doesn't follow the rules. He breaks all of the rules. He makes everything the way he wants them to look, and it's unique. It's special. He was wild both in his real life. He also had a big family, and his family didn't work and they were consuming his money, but he didn't mind because he also consumed the said money, and he had a lot of fun in his real life. So who knows what we can only dream about in our small mundane lives that he might have done in those amazing Renaissance Italian. Well, the Romans are popular for their beautiful parties. Let's just say that. Uh, and yeah, Renaissance doesn't only subject itself to Italy; it expanded towards Northern Europe as well. But the idea is that a lot of the Italian culture also has its roots in the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, mostly in the Greek for some reason. I think the Greeks had, well, actually, Romans did kind of integrate a lot of the gods and arts of the Greeks. So technically, the root is the Greek. Maybe you can go even further than the Greeks, but I think let's stop at the Greeks for the for an easy understanding of of the history of art. Um, yeah. So, being done with that part of our little introduction, let's kind of look at why this hand is so amazing, in my opinion. We have this is just a sketch, so we can kind of get a little bit of shadow and highlights here and there. But what really makes me love this hand is the way the waves of the hand are going on top of the bones. So um, when we're going like this, we already see a very interesting way. It's like at first it doesn't really make sense. How can you make a hand look so natural? But if you take the time and just trace, this is what case study means. You try to reproduce what they were doing. If you just trace and see kind of like how the muscles are positioning themselves and how the skin feels and how the shadows fall, you can already see a very interesting way of creating your own art. And of course, I'm not saying reproduce Michelangelo's art, but just by tracing, you can just learn a lot about a technique that might actually inspire you to create new techniques. And this is what I really think that art is all about, to just get inspired and create your new things based on the world, because we are not born with information. We all learn this new information. But just as an idea here, well, I think I kind of messed it up here. Let me try to make the outline. Just creating the outline really feels gives you the satisfaction that in a way it feels very organic, very natural, and it's very easy to trace, very easy to follow, because he didn't try to create complex complex subjects. As I say, simplicity is always the easiest way to describe something to achieve your goal. But even in this simplicity, we see a lot of complexity. And the complexity doesn't come from the lines, it's actually coming from what the lines depict. And because it's very easy to trace, if you see, it's child's play in a way. But when we get, okay, so let's say something like this. See, very easy. Well, I should have done this one as well here. Ah, maybe larger. Something like that, whatever. But when we look at it, we can already start to see the complexity of how the line are intersecting, because you have to have your hand very tensed, your muscle very tensed to achieve this sort of lines, this tendons to show up very clearly on your hand. And in order to push and create these ridges, although if you would look at your hand, you will see that there's way more ridges than we have here. But the idea is that he really creates a push in his hand. So it feels like if this hand grabs you, you will feel the strength that this hand imposes on you. So that is the amazing part of creating something that is very expressive and follows very simple rules, but non-conformist rules in another way. So that's why Michelangelo is my favorite. And I just wanted to share this experience with you guys because you might. Uh, I'm not a fan in a way. I'm more. I think like of myself as a pioneer because I always try to create like Michelangelo did new things that might not work, and through these accidents you can always find something interesting that can happen. Of course, in his line of work, he needed to make it work. Because back then this was a profession. So if you messed up the profession, well, there was a good likelihood your head would go off. So he wanted to keep his head on his shoulders. So that is also an important thing. But I have one more image I wanted to show you guys. Uh, this one. And this one, what I found amazing about this one is if we look over here, this is what I call a very, it's a proto filter, focus filter. Because today we can just focus on something and just blur something else in the background. But imagine doing this in sculpture. So if we look here, we have a lot of details on this character. And we can see it very clearly. But the more we go to the right, oh, come on, we start to lose the details of the face and everything. And the moment we got here, we lost the face totally. So this is in blur mode. But it's only for the faces. And probably this is due to the fact that the sculpture wasn't finished, because we can kind of see here that we have a lot of undefined details, and this is still marble. But the idea is that even in this mistake, well, maybe it's not a mistake. Let's say in this situation that's very fortunate for us to see, we can see still how much simplicity can retain a lot of detail and still give you a very cool picture. Well, a very cool view. And they're still pretty much in those. He's still using these uncomfortable positions, which makes the whole composition very interesting. And yeah, I feel it's fantastic because it's very powerful. It's the characters are not all the same size, and yet it still fits together somehow. It still feels good, and this is all art is: feeling that it feels good to you. Doesn't matter what people criticize about it. Everybody can say, "Oh, it's not following the standards. You're a failure because you're not creating it the way everybody does." It's like, well, defy the rules. Make your own rules. If it feels good to you, maybe, who knows, in 200 years after you have passed away, you shall be considered a great artist of a very unique era. And your art might actually be very valuable, and you'll be thinking, damn, why didn't this happen when I was alive? But what can we do? Most artists have to die to become famous. Like if we think about Van Gogh, poor guy only sold one painting in his life, and that was to his brother. And the guy was starving and going through a very horrible, well, not necessarily horrible life. He was a little bit demented, so. But again, he had interesting friends and a very supportive family, but his way of view of life and of art was so different at that time that nobody understood it because everybody looked at him and said, yeah, interesting, but no. And they were always going in those times in his lifetime, they were going for perfection. Let's create the most perfect human being, the most realistic. They were trying to transpose reality into painting, but he said, no, that's boring. And even Michelangelo went by the same concept. It's boring to create what you just see. And even though in art is like paint what you see, not what you think you see, they went the other way and said, maybe I should paint what I think I see, or maybe what I just think and remove the seeing. And the seeing is just there for reference to just create my ideas more voluptuous or more digestible and interesting and voluminous. And the more you play with your ideas, the more weird they become. Sometimes they can tend to be, because let's be honest, art embodies a lot of emotion, and we express our emotions through our art. So, for example, if you have a very somber day, you're gonna create something very dark just to get it out of you, just put it there on the canvas and show everybody. It's like, look at it. You feel this hate, you feel this anger, you feel this disappointment. Yeah. Well, I don't feel it anymore because I put it on the canvas. It's out of me, it's on the canvas. Have a nice day. So, the idea is that we can create art with a lot of empathy, a lot of hate, a lot of anger, a lot of love. But it's art nonetheless, even if it's morbid or if it's very vivid or full of life or full of death. Uh, good and bad are just principles that art can play around with. You can create a beautiful devil that can look like Jesus and a Jesus that looks like horrible like the devil. And you can create these contradictions to kind of work in the same environment. You put them together. If it feels good to you, go for it. And never get discouraged if somebody says, nah, that doesn't look nice. Just remember, maybe in 100 years or 200, you're gonna be famous. Well, I hope this little experiment was interesting. And who knows, maybe if you guys like it, maybe in the future we can do another interesting episode like this, play with other concepts and look at other artists. And who knows? Maybe we will create our own thing. No, I'm thinking like I remember Bruce Lee, which was an amazing actor and had a very difficult life throughout his career. He actually was more than just an actor. He was a philosopher. Um, he was an educator. He also created his own fighting style, his own school, and he was very empathetic towards those that needed help. And I remember there was this story about Jackie Chan playing in a movie. He was a double or something in one of Bruce Lee's movies. And Bruce Lee, when he was fighting, he accidentally hit Jackie Chan in the head a little stronger than he should have. And Jackie Chan was down on the floor. And when he woke up, he was so happy that he was knocked out by Bruce Lee. So, yeah, you see, you can put everything in a positive life. Because when you look at people that inspire you, you don't see the person anymore. You see the concept, you see the dream, the idea, and you embody that idea. Because at the end of the day, what are we other than a sack of meat that just accumulates information from around us, and in our mind we just jumble it together, and then we just give new ideas out of those ideas and so on. But we have to accumulate this information from around us and from people around us, and it's amazing. It gives such a new perspective to how we see life. So yeah, um, you guys stay awesome. I'll catch you guys next time, and bye 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 bye.